Imagine someone you trusted completely. Imagine handing them a version of yourself that very few people ever get to see. Your fears, your plans, your unfinished dreams, the small things that would embarrass you if the wrong person heard them. Imagine that person holding all of it gently, the way you would hold something breakable. Imagine sleeping soundly at night because you believed, without question, that this trust was safe. Now, open your eyes. Did they take that trust and use it against you? Did they smile at you while already deciding to hurt you? Did you find out the truth by accident, in a moment that split your life into before and after? Do you still replay the conversation where they lied to your face, searching for a sign you missed? Do you still wonder how someone could look you in the eyes and betray you so easily? Do you lie awake rehearsing what you should have said, what you still want to say, what you will never get to say? If any of this touches you, then you already know something most people never learn until it is forced on them. Betrayal does not just wound the heart, it wounds your trust in your own judgment. It makes you doubt not only them, but yourself. And that is exactly where this journey begins. Part 1. The replay. There is a particular kind of suffering that does not come from the event itself, but from living inside it again and again. You were betrayed once, in a single moment, on a single day, but your mind does not know that. Your mind takes that moment and plays it on a loop, at 3 in the morning, in the middle of a meeting, in the silence, right before sleep. You see their face, you hear their voice, you remember the exact sentence that broke something in you, and you feel it all over again, as if it were happening now, not then. But the truth is, the replay is not protecting you. It only feels that way. Somewhere inside, you believe that if you go over it enough times, you will finally understand it, finally control it, finally make it stop hurting. But replaying a wound does not heal it. It only rubs it raw. Think of a river that has cut a channel into rock. At first, the water just moves. But over years, the same current wears the same path deeper and deeper, until the rock itself is shaped by the water's habit. The river did not intend to carve a canyon. It simply kept flowing where it had always flowed. Your mind is the same. Each replay is water finding the easiest channel, the one it has already carved. And the more you let the thought run its old course, the deeper that canyon becomes, until one day you cannot even remember what the land looked like before the wound. Marcus Aurelius, writing to no one but himself in the middle of a war camp, reminded himself of something almost embarrassingly simple, that no external event can disturb the mind unless the mind gives it permission to. He was not saying the betrayal did not happen. He was saying the replay is a second event, one you are causing yourself, one you have the power to stop causing. Picture an ordinary evening. You are washing dishes, or driving home, or lying in bed, and suddenly the memory arrives uninvited, the way it always does. This time, instead of following it down the same channel, you notice it arriving. You say, quietly, to yourself, "This is the old water finding the old path." And you let the thought pass through without following it to the end. Not the mind replaying the wound, but the mind observing the wound and choosing not to relive it. Part 2. Why? There is a question that betrayal always leaves behind, and it is rarely what happened. It is why. Why did they do it? Why did they choose to lie instead of simply telling the truth? Why, out of every person, did they decide you were the one worth deceiving? You search for the answer as if finding it will finally let you rest. You imagine that if you understood their reasoning, the pain would make sense, and if it made sense, it would somehow hurt less. So, you build theories. Maybe they never really cared. Maybe they were always like this and you just did not see it. Maybe something is wrong with you, something that makes people feel safe treating you this way. But the truth is, most betrayals do not have a satisfying why. People betray for reasons that are smaller, uglier, and more disappointing than the story deserves. Weakness, convenience, fear of confrontation, a desire that mattered more to them than honesty. There is rarely a villain's monologue waiting for you at the end of the search. There is usually only the plain, unglamorous fact that someone chose themselves over you and did not think you deserved to know. Think of a mirror hanging on a wall in a dim room. You keep walking toward it, hoping that if you get close enough, the glass will finally show you something new, some deeper answer hidden behind your own reflection. But a mirror only shows what stands in front of it. It cannot explain. It cannot apologize. It cannot give you the why you are looking for. The harder you stare into it, searching for meaning that was never placed there, the more exhausted you become, chasing your own reflection as if it was someone else's face. Viktor Frankl spent years in circumstances where he watched human beings do things to one another that had no acceptable why at all. And what he came to understand was not that suffering always has a reason waiting to be discovered, but that a person can still choose what the suffering means to them, even when the cause behind it remains senseless and small. You do not need their reason, you only need your response. Picture yourself finally putting the question down, not because you found the answer, but because you realized the answer, even if you found it, would not be big enough to justify the size of the pain. You stop demanding an explanation from someone who was never going to give you an honest one anyway. Not chasing a why that was never designed to satisfy you, but choosing a meaning that belongs entirely to you. Part 3. The urge to expose them. At some point, almost everyone who has been betrayed feels the same pull, to make the other person see, publicly, clearly, undeniably, what they did. You want them exposed. You want their friends to know, their family to know, their new partner to know exactly who they are. Some quiet, furious part of you believes that if enough people saw the truth, justice would finally be served, and you could finally exhale. You imagine the confrontation. You imagine the perfect sentence that would finally make them feel even a fraction of what you felt. You rehearse it in the shower, in the car, in your head at night, sharpening it like a blade you may never actually use. But the truth is, the desire for exposure is rarely about justice. It is about control. It is the mind's attempt to reclaim power in a situation where you felt powerless, by making someone else feel powerless in return. And chasing that kind of power keeps you tied to the very person you are trying to be free of. Think of a mountain standing in a storm. Lightning strikes it, wind tears at it, rain floods down its sides, and still the mountain does not rearrange itself to prove anything to the storm. It does not shout back. It does not need the storm to admit it was wrong. The mountain simply remains what it has always been, and eventually the storm moves on, having changed nothing about what stands there. Epictetus, a man who had once been enslaved and beaten so badly his leg never healed properly, taught something that sounds almost unreasonable until you have lived it, that other people's opinions, choices, and character are not yours to control, and trying to control them is the fastest way to lose control of yourself. Picture the moment you feel the old urge rise again, the desire to make them understand, to force the confession, to win the argument that exists mostly in your own head. Instead of building the perfect confrontation, you let the thought arrive, and you let it leave, unspoken. Not because they deserve your silence as a gift, but because your peace does not deserve to be sacrificed for their reaction. Not fighting to be understood by someone who chose not to understand you, but standing steady, needing no confession to know what is true. Part 4. Grieving the person you thought they were. There is a grief inside betrayal that people rarely name correctly. You are not only mourning the relationship, you are mourning a version of a person who may never have fully existed, at least not in the way you believed. The one who listened without an agenda, the one who would never do this to you, the one you trusted with the parts of yourself you protect most carefully. That person is gone now, or perhaps was never quite there, and grieving something that may have been partly imaginary is a strange, disorienting kind of pain. You are not just sad, you are confused about what exactly you are sad for. But the truth is, this grief is real, and it deserves to be treated as real, not dismissed, because the loss is invisible to everyone else. You lost an idea you had built your life around, quietly, over months or years, without realizing how much weight you had placed on it. Think of light passing through a window you always assumed was clear glass. For a long time, everything you saw through it looked accurate, ordinary, true. Then one day, you noticed the glass was slightly tinted the whole time, subtly changing every color that passed through it. You were not wrong to trust your eyes. You simply did not know the glass itself was shaping what you saw. Grieving is the moment you finally see the tint and have to reconsider everything you once thought was simply the world as it is. Carl Jung wrote that we do not see people as they are, but often as we need them to be, and that until we recognize this, we remain unconsciously attached not to the person, but to the image we projected onto them. Picture yourself sitting with that grief instead of rushing past it, not pretending you feel nothing, not performing strength you do not have yet. You allow yourself to mourn the version of them you believed in, the same way you would mourn anyone who mattered deeply and is now gone. Not denying the loss because it embarrasses you, but grieving it honestly so it can finally finish moving through you. Part 5. The temptation to become bitter. There is a version of you that betrayal tries to build, quietly, patiently, in the background of your days. It whispers that trusting anyone again is foolish. It tells you to expect the worst, so you are never surprised again. It convinces you that suspicion is simply wisdom now, and that closing yourself off is not fear, but protection. This version of you feels safer, harder to hurt, harder to fool. But the truth is that safety is an illusion built entirely out of walls, and walls do not only keep pain out. They keep everything out, including the good that could still reach you if you let it. Think of a river blocked by a dam. At first, the water behind it grows calm, still, seemingly under control, but water that is never allowed to move begins to stagnate. It grows heavy, dark, unable to sustain anything living inside it. A river was never meant to stop. It was meant to keep moving, even after it passes through difficult ground, because movement is what keeps it clean. Seneca warned that anger and bitterness, if indulged long enough, stop being a response to what happened and become a way of living, a permanent residence the mind builds for itself. And once built, that residence is far harder to leave than it was to enter. Picture yourself catching the bitterness early, the moment it tries to convince you that closing off is strength. You notice the thought, "I will never trust anyone the way I trusted them," and instead of accepting it as fact, you recognize it as fear disguised as wisdom. Not building walls that protect nothing but your isolation, but keeping the river moving, even through the hardest ground it has ever crossed. Part 6. What actually belongs to you. Somewhere in the middle of this pain, a question becomes unavoidable. What is actually yours to control here? Not their choices, not their character, not the story they now tell about you to justify what they did, not whether they ever feel guilt or apologize or even acknowledge what happened at all. For a long time you may have believed that healing depended on them, on their apology, their remorse, their admission that they were wrong. But the truth is, waiting for someone who hurt you on purpose to hand you your own healing is waiting for a debt they were never going to pay. Think of sunlight falling on two different surfaces, one still water and one shattered glass. The same light touches both, but the water holds it whole, calm, reflecting clearly, while the glass scatters it into 1,000 broken fragments, distorted and sharp. The light did not change. Only what received it changed how it appeared. You cannot always choose what light falls on you, but you have far more say than you think in whether you meet it as still water or as broken glass. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to one distinction above almost all others. Some things are within our power, our judgments, our responses, our choices, and some things are not, other people's actions being chief among them, and the entire discipline of a steady mind begins with knowing exactly where that line sits. Picture yourself making a short, honest list. Their choice to lie was not yours to control. Their decision to betray you was not yours to control. But how you carry this moving forward, what you allow it to turn you into, that is still entirely yours. Not waiting for an apology that may never come, but building a peace that never depended on it in the first place. Part 7. What the betrayal revealed about you. At some point, if you are honest, the pain of betrayal begins to ask a harder question, not just what they did to you, but what it revealed about how you had been living before it happened. Where were the boundaries you did not enforce? Where were the warning signs you noticed and quietly explained away? Where did you already sense, somewhere beneath the surface, that something was not right, long before you had proof? This is not the same as blaming yourself for what they did. Their choice was theirs alone. But the truth is, betrayal often finds the exact place where you had already stopped protecting yourself, the exact door you had already left slightly open, hoping it would not matter. Think of a mirror left uncleaned for so long that dust settles into its surface until you can no longer tell whether what you are seeing is your reflection or simply grime collected over time. Betrayal, in its cruelest way, forces you to wipe that mirror clean. You do not enjoy what you see at first. But once it is clean, you finally see clearly, not distorted by hope, not softened by wanting to believe the best. Carl Jung believed that what disturbs us most about another person's behavior can sometimes point us toward an unclaimed part of ourselves, not because we caused their actions, but because their actions expose exactly where we were unwilling to see the truth. Picture yourself looking honestly at where your own boundaries were too soft, not to punish yourself, but to understand yourself better. Maybe you ignored a pattern because you feared being alone more than you feared being hurt. Maybe you excused small lies because the relationship felt too important to question. Seeing this clearly is not self-blame. It is self-respect, arriving late, but arriving. Not avoiding the mirror because the reflection is uncomfortable, but cleaning it fully so you finally see the truth of your own patterns. Part 8. The power of silence. There is a particular kind of strength that betrayal tempts you to abandon. The strength of silence. Not the silence of denial, and not the silence of suppression, but the silence of someone who has decided they no longer need to perform their pain for an audience in order for it to be real. You may feel pressure from yourself or from others to explain everything, to tell the whole story to everyone who will listen, to make sure the world knows exactly what was done to you. There can be real value in speaking to people you trust. But the truth is, there is a difference between processing your pain with someone safe and scattering your pain everywhere, hoping enough witnesses will finally validate what you already know happened. Think of a mountain lake early in the morning, before any wind has touched it. The surface is so still, it becomes a mirror for the sky itself, holding the entire sunrise without a single ripple breaking the image. That stillness is not emptiness, it is depth held quietly. A lake does not need to announce what it is reflecting, it simply holds it, clear and complete, undisturbed by anyone passing by. Epictetus warned that most people speak too quickly about what has wounded them, spending on the outside what should first be gathered on the inside, and that a wound spoken about too soon to too many often heals more slowly than one given quiet space first. Picture yourself choosing carefully who deserves your full story and giving yourself permission to keep the rest for no one but yourself. Not because you are hiding shame. Because your healing is not a performance ode to an audience. Not explaining yourself to everyone who has an opinion, but holding your truth like still water, clear enough for you, without needing the whole sky to witness it. Part 9. The Shadow of Rage. Underneath the sadness of betrayal, there is almost always rage, and rage frightens people who think of themselves as calm, reasonable, in control. You may have spent your whole life avoiding anger, believing it made you a worse person, or a less spiritual one, or simply someone you did not want to be. So when betrayal brings rage to the surface, violent, intrusive, sometimes shocking in its intensity, you may try immediately to push it back down, ashamed of its presence. But the truth is, rage that is denied does not disappear. It only goes underground, and from underground it finds indirect ways to surface, in irritability toward people who did nothing wrong, in exhaustion that has no clear cause, in a numbness that slowly replaces feeling anything at all. Think of a wildfire moving through a forest that has not burned in decades. It looks devastating in the moment. Blackened ground, fallen trees, smoke rising for days. But foresters have learned something the fire itself already knew. Certain seeds in that soil cannot open without heat that intense. What looks like pure destruction is, underneath, also a kind of clearing, making space for growth that could not have happened any other way. Carl Jung insisted that a person does not become whole by pretending only to contain light, but by becoming conscious of the darkness inside them as well. Because what remains unconscious does not vanish. It simply directs your life from somewhere you cannot see. Picture yourself allowing the rage to exist, fully, honestly, without immediately trying to be good about it. You feel it in your chest, your jaw, your hands. You do not act on it recklessly, and you do not deny it exists. You simply let it burn through, the way fire moves through old growth, clearing what needed clearing. Not pretending you feel only sadness when rage is also present, but letting the fire pass through consciously, so it clears ground instead of burning in secret. Part 10. Meaning after meaninglessness. There is a moment, usually much later than you expect, when the sharpest pain of betrayal begins to soften enough for a different question to arrive. What now? Not what happened, not why, but what you are going to build with the person this experience has made you into. Many people resist this question at first because it feels like it is asking them to be grateful for something that hurt them, and gratitude is the last thing they feel capable of. But the truth is, finding meaning in suffering does not require thanking the person who caused it. It only requires refusing to let the suffering be wasted. Think of a tree that has been struck by lightning and survived, scarred along one entire side, bark blackened, half its branches gone. It does not grow back exactly as it was before, but it keeps growing, often stronger on the side that remains, having learned, in whatever way a tree learns, to root itself more deeply against future storms. The lightning did not improve the tree, but the tree's response to the lightning shaped what kind of tree it became afterward. Viktor Frankl, having survived what should have destroyed any capacity for meaning at all, concluded that everything can be taken from a person except one final freedom, the freedom to choose their attitude in any given circumstance, and that this last freedom cannot be stolen by anyone, no matter what else they take. Picture yourself asking, honestly, what this experience is teaching you about discernment, about boundaries, about the kind of trust you want to rebuild and the kind you no longer want to offer so freely. Not because the betrayal was a gift, but because you refuse to let it be only a wound with nothing built on top of it. Not letting the suffering mean nothing, but choosing deliberately, what it will mean going forward. Part 11. Forgiveness without reconciliation. There is a word that appears in almost every conversation about betrayal, and it is a word many people resist with their whole body: forgiveness. It sounds, to a wounded person, like being asked to say what happened was acceptable, or to open the door back up to someone who has not earned that trust again. But the truth is, forgiveness, properly understood, has almost nothing to do with the other person at all. It is not a message sent to them. It is not permission for them to return. It is something that happens entirely inside you, a release of the rope you have been holding, the one still tying your peace to their behavior. Think of a hand clenched so tightly around a stone that the fingers begin to cramp, ache, lose feeling entirely. The stone was thrown at you once, but you are the one still gripping it now, carrying its weight everywhere you go, long after the person who threw it has walked away and likely forgotten the weight of what they did. Forgiveness is not pretending the stone never hit you. It is finally opening the hand. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again that holding on to resentment toward someone who wronged him cost him more than the wrong itself ever had, because the wrong happened once, in a single moment, while the resentment could be relived endlessly, entirely by his own choice. Picture yourself opening your hand, slowly, not because they deserve it, but because you are tired of carrying a weight that was never meant to be permanent. This does not mean reconciliation. It does not mean trusting them again. It simply means you no longer choose to relive the throw, not forgiving because they earned it, but releasing the stone because you no longer wish to carry it. Part 12. Becoming ungovernable. There is a final shift that happens for people who move fully through betrayal instead of staying frozen inside it, and it is difficult to describe without sounding almost strange. You stop needing the world to be fair in order to feel steady in it. You stop needing people to be trustworthy in order to trust your own judgment about who deserves closeness and who does not. You become, in a very specific sense, ungovernable, not by rules, but by other people's choices. This does not mean you become cold or unreachable. It means your inner state is no longer a hostage that anyone else can hold. Someone can still disappoint you. Someone can still lie to you again someday, because you remain, wisely, willing to trust selectively. But their choice no longer has the power to decide who you are. Think of light reaching a wall covered in shattered glass, the wall we returned to earlier, only this time watch closely what happens over years. Rain slowly cleans it. Wind slowly smooths its edges. Eventually, the same wall, once fractured and dangerous to touch, becomes something people notice for how it catches the light differently than any ordinary surface, scattering it into small, unexpected colors no smooth wall could ever produce. The break did not disappear. It became part of what makes the light beautiful now. Epictetus taught that the wise person carries their peace with them everywhere, into good fortune and bad, into loyalty and betrayal alike, not because nothing touches them, but because they have learned exactly which things are theirs to lose and which things never truly belong to anyone but them in the first place. Picture the version of yourself who has finally arrived here, not hardened, not naive, steady. You no longer flinch, waiting for the next person to prove they are like the last one. You no longer perform forgiveness or performance bitterness for anyone watching. You simply live, quietly sovereign, over the one thing that was always yours to govern. Not a person who trusts no one out of fear, not a person who trusts everyone out of denial, but a person who trusts wisely, because their peace no longer depends on the outcome. Part 13. The ones who say nothing happened. There is a particular cruelty inside betrayal that few people talk about, and it rarely comes from the person who betrayed you. It comes from the people standing beside you, watching, who decide it is easier to say nothing at all. the friend who stays quiet because taking a side feels uncomfortable, the family member who tells you to just move on, to stop bringing it up, to let it go for the sake of peace. You are not only carrying what was done to you, you are carrying the silence of people who saw it and chose comfort over truth. You may find yourself waiting for someone, anyone, to simply say out loud what you already know, that what happened to you was wrong. You wait for validation the way a person waits for rain during a drought, checking the sky again and again, disappointed each time the clouds pass, without releasing anything. But the truth is, other people's silence is not proof that you are wrong. It is only proof of what they are willing to risk. Some people will always choose comfort over confrontation, ease over honesty, and their choice says everything about their own limits, and nothing at all about the truth of what you lived through. Think of a mountain standing at the edge of a valley where fog rolls in every morning, thick enough to hide the peak completely from anyone standing below. For hours, sometimes for days, no one in the valley can see the mountain at all. But the mountain has not moved. It has not shrunk. It has not disappeared simply because the fog made it temporarily invisible to people who were not looking closely enough or who preferred not to look at all. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the opinion of the crowd, even a crowd that says nothing, has no power to change what is actually true, and that a person who needs universal agreement before they can trust their own experience will spend their entire life waiting for a verdict that was never necessary in the first place. Picture yourself releasing the need for their acknowledgement, not because their silence does not sting, it does, but because your reality was never dependent on being witnessed by people too afraid to speak. Not waiting for the fog to lift before believing the mountain is there, but trusting what you saw clearly, long before anyone else was willing to look. Part 14. When you become the villain in their story. There is a strange, disorienting turn that betrayal often takes, one that almost no one warns you about in advance. At some point, you may discover that the person who betrayed you has rewritten the story, and in their version, you are no longer the one who was wronged. You are the difficult one, the dramatic one. The reason things fell apart in the first place. You watch, helpless, as the facts get rearranged to protect someone else's comfort, and you become, in their telling, the villain of your own pain. The instinct here is powerful, to correct the record at any cost, to make sure the truth wins, to chase down every person who might believe the false version and set them straight. You feel that if the story is left uncorrected, the injustice doubles, first the betrayal, and now the theft of your own narrative. But the truth is, you cannot control the story someone tells about you, only the story you tell yourself. And the energy spent trying to win a narrative battle with someone who has already shown they are willing to lie is energy that could have gone toward your own healing instead. Think of a river being blamed by the people downstream every time the water rises higher than expected, as if the river had chosen maliciously to flood their fields. The river does not defend itself. It does not send messengers to explain that the rain upstream was heavier than usual, that its current only follows the shape of the land it was given. It simply continues moving, indifferent to whether it is understood correctly by everyone who watches from the banks. Epictetus taught that people who misjudge you are not actually judging you at all. They are judging the picture of you they have built in their own minds, often shaped more by their own guilt or self-protection than by anything you actually did. And correcting a picture inside someone else's head is a task no one can ever fully complete. Picture yourself letting a false story exist somewhere out there, unchallenged, while you hold the true one quietly and completely within yourself. This does not mean you never speak your truth to people who matter. It means you stop treating every uninformed opinion as an emergency requiring your defense, not chasing every distortion of your story across every room it travels through, but holding the true version steady in your own hands, undisturbed by who else believes it. Part 15. Learning to trust the slow way. Eventually, if you keep walking this path long enough, a quieter question arrives, one that has nothing to do with the person who hurt you anymore. It is about the people still in front of you, the new ones, the ones who have done nothing wrong at all. Can you let them in? Can you offer even a small piece of trust again without your whole body bracing for the same betrayal to repeat itself in a different face? Many people, understandably, answer this question by refusing to try at all. It feels safer to assume everyone is capable of the same deception, to test people relentlessly before allowing closeness, to keep one hand permanently on the door. This feels like wisdom. Often it is simply fear wearing wisdom's clothing. But the truth is, trust rebuilt too quickly is fragile, and trust withheld forever is its own kind of prison. And the actual discipline lies in a third option most people never practice: trusting slowly, in small increments, adjusted honestly by what a person actually does over time, rather than by what the last person did to you. Think of a bridge built not all at once, but plank by plank, each new piece tested by weight before the next is added. A bridge built entirely in a single reckless motion may collapse the first time real pressure is placed on it. But a bridge built slowly, plank tested against plank, becomes strong precisely because nothing was assumed. Trust rebuilt this way does not collapse easily, because it was never asked to hold more weight than it had already proven it could carry. Carl Jung believed that psychological maturity was not the elimination of vulnerability, but the capacity to remain open to life while still being fully conscious of its risks, and that a person who closes themselves off entirely in the name of self-protection has not actually protected themselves. They have simply traded one kind of suffering for another. Picture yourself offering a new person one small plank of trust, nothing more, and watching honestly what they do with it before offering the next. Not naive, not paranoid. Simply building carefully, the way any structure meant to last is built. Not refusing every bridge because one collapsed beneath you once, but building the next one slowly, plank by plank, tested by what is real. Part 16. The version of you waiting on the other side. There is a moment, quiet and easy to miss, when you realize you have gone an entire day without thinking about what happened. Not because you forced yourself not to think about it, and not because you finally solved it in some dramatic breakthrough, but simply because your mind had somewhere else to be. It is a small moment. It rarely feels like victory when it happens, but it is, in its own understated way, one of the clearest signs that something inside you has genuinely shifted. You may feel guilty about this at first, strange as that sounds. Some part of you wonders if moving forward means the betrayal did not matter, if healing is a kind of forgetting, if letting the wound close means letting the person who caused it off the hook. You almost want to hold the pain a little longer, out of loyalty to your own sense of justice. But the truth is, healing was never a betrayal of what happened to you. It is not agreement that the wrong was acceptable. It is simply your refusal to let one moment, however devastating, dictate the shape of every moment that comes after it. You are allowed to carry the lesson without carrying the wound at full weight forever. Think of a scar left behind after a wound has fully closed. It does not disappear. It remains, visible if you look for it, a permanent record that something happened here. But a scar does not bleed. It does not ache with every touch. It has become simply a part of the larger surface of the skin, quiet evidence of survival rather than an open invitation to keep suffering. A body does not treat a scar as an ongoing injury. Eventually, it treats it as history. Viktor Frankl observed that suffering, once it has found meaning, stops being pure suffering and becomes something closer to a price paid for something the person now carries forward. a kind of currency spent that bought, however unfairly, a deeper understanding of what actually matters. Picture the version of yourself who is not defined by this chapter, though they carry its lessons quietly, permanently, the way skin carries a scar. Not because the wound was small, but because you did the long, unglamorous work of letting it close. Not staying loyal to the pain out of fear of forgetting, but carrying the scar forward as proof, not punishment, that you survived it. Part 17. What you would tell someone else. There is a strange kind of clarity that arrives when you imagine standing in front of someone who is living through exactly what you once lived through, sitting in the exact seat you once sat in, staring at the exact wall you once stared at during your worst nights. What would you actually tell them? Not the version filtered through your own bitterness, and not the version softened to make yourself feel better. The honest version. You probably would not tell them. The pain disappears quickly. You would not promise them the person who hurt them will ever apologize, or understand, or change. You would not tell them time alone heals everything, because you know by now that time only creates the conditions where healing becomes possible if you actually do the work inside it. But the truth is, you would tell them something steadier than any of that. You would tell them that the person standing in front of them right now, terrified, humiliated, furious, grieving, is not broken. You would tell them that what happened is not a verdict on their worth, only a fact about someone else's character. You would tell them the version of themselves waiting on the other side of this is not smaller than who they were before. It is, in almost every case, wiser, steadier, harder to fool. Think of a lighthouse standing on a coastline it did not choose, built specifically because ships kept wrecking against rocks no one had marked clearly enough before. The lighthouse does not resent the wrecks that made it necessary. It simply stands there now, steady, casting light across the same dark water, so that whoever comes through that same storm after you does not have to navigate it in the same blindness you once did. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, more than once, that the obstacle in the path can itself become the path, that what nearly destroys a person can, if they let it, become the very material out of which their steadiness is built. Picture yourself becoming, without ever intending to, a kind of quiet lighthouse for someone else who has not yet reached the shore you are standing on now, not because you sought the role, because you survived long enough and honestly enough to have something worth casting light on. Not wasting what this cost you, but letting it become, eventually, the very thing that helps someone else find their way through the same dark water. If you have stayed until now, some part of you already knows this was never really about them. It was about the part of you that survived what they did and is still here, still breathing, still capable of trusting again when trust is actually earned. Betrayal takes many things. It takes comfort for a while. It takes certainty for a while. It takes the easy, unguarded way you once moved through the world. But it cannot take your judgment. It cannot take your discipline. It cannot take the quiet, unglamorous strength of a person who keeps choosing peace, morning after morning, without needing anyone's permission or apology to do so. You do not have to feel finished tonight. You do not have to feel forgiving tonight, or strong tonight, or even calm tonight. You only have to keep doing what you have already been doing, simply by staying with these words this long, choosing, again and again, not to let the worst thing that happened to you become the only thing that defines you. Not everyone who hurts you owes you closure, but you owe yourself the peace to move forward without waiting for it. If this reached something in you tonight, stay with us for what comes next, where we go further into what the ancients understood about the people who wrong us, and what Carl Jung called the shadow that every betrayal forces us to finally see. Subscribe to Stoic Journal and walk into the next lesson with us,